CEE,
Central Europe Explained,
an IDM podcast series
powered by Erste Group.
Episode 41. Two sides of the same coin. Croatia introducing the euro. Following the introduction of the euro, Europe's economy went through drastic changes in the last 3 decades. On January 1st, 1999, the EU launched its official currency aiming to unify the economy of 12 European countries. After 3 years, it officially went into circulation. This process set up a place of economic unification known as the Eurozone. Today, 20 out of the 27 member countries of the European Union are part of it. Throughout the years, diverse mechanisms and financial policies have been perfected to regulate the integration of new countries into the Eurozone. This is to maintain a balance and avoid as far as possible the fluctuation of the economy both in the countries that intend to join and in the countries that are already members. Yet, the introduction of a country in the Eurozone is one latest step among a long series of changes in a transitioning state's economy. Before the launch of the euro in a member state, it is mandatory protocol to enter the Eurozone, aiming to ensure economic stability for all parties involved in this process. There are 4 important financial indicators of a country that must be evaluated to join the Eurozone: price stability, sound policies that aim for sustainability, minimum currency rate fluctuation, and last but not least, interest rates that ensure the resilience of the convergence. These indicators, together, form part of the so-called convergence criteria established by the EU members in Maastricht 1991. The joining country must take such indicators into account while preparing for its step into the Eurozone. For such a phase, the EU has created an exchange rate mechanism, ERM, which acts as a trial scenario following past experiences and lessons learned, providing a framework smoothing the currency transition. Since the beginning of the 90s, some countries have adopted different and flexible ERMs. On January 1st, 1999, the ERM2 was established as the official protocol. It aims to prepare the country's economy for transition by reducing the exchange rate variability. ERMs can be considered as a test phase in which the economic stability of the country in the process is closely monitored, as well as its structures, policies, budget plans, and the use of the budget. Although adopting this mechanism is not mandatory, it is highly recommended to take on it for at least 2 years to meet the requirements of the indicator, which on the other hand must be mandatorily complied with. After Lithuania joined the euro system in January 2015, it was now Croatia's turn, and that process we are going to explore in today's podcast. Ten years after joining the European Union in 2013, on 1st January 2023, Croatia entered the Eurozone. As it replaced by the euro, the Croatian old currency, the kuna, will slowly become an object, yet a device full of history. Since 5th September 2021, prices in both currencies have been displayed and dual circulation of the euro and the kuna banknotes was allowed until 2 weeks before the introduction day of the euro. So now, only the euro remain accepted for use. To talk about this historic event for Croatia, we have again the pleasure to welcome to our podcast Mario Holzner, the Executive Director of the Viennese Institute for International Economic Studies. And we will be talking about Croatia introducing the euro. Mario, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Mario, to start us off, which history lies behind the kuna and where does this currency actually come from?
Well, the modern kuna was introduced, I believe, in 1994, replacing an intermediate currency, the Croatian dinar, that was introduced after the end of Yugoslavia and the Yugoslav dinar. However, the introduction of the kuna was controversial as before the fascist Quisling state of the Ustascha regime during the Second World War had the kuna as their currency. There is a longer historical background of this currency as the medieval pelts and fur skin currency of the Marten. However, this is obviously a problematic name, and I think particularly Croatians who are maybe more liberal oriented will be happy to get rid of the kuna and have the euro as currency.
Mm-hmm. What will be the impact of the introduction of the euro on the business relations of the country, especially when we think about consumer protection, employment, capital, bank accounts, and interest rates?
I don't think that there will be a huge difference. The kuna was basically pegged to the euro, and before that to the German mark, without big oscillations around basically the 7.5 kuna for euro, and yeah, so not a big change. There is a bonus for the banking system, so the Croatian banking system is under the euro, also under the protection of the European Central Bank. However, on the other hand, basically most of the Croatian banking system was before already owned by banks from the euro area. So I mean, the gain is limited. It will be good for tourists who will not need to exchange the money and similar issues relating money, changing the money for business people and so on.
Do you think that the feeling of inflation after the introduction of the euro, which is often very real, especially when we look at prices in the gastronomy, will it be alleviated by the already high inflation in Europe, or will it make it even worse?
I think it will be rather not felt given the high inflation. So clearly people have started to adjust prices on the menus in restaurants and so on, typically a little bit higher than they used to be before. But given the overall inflation that is much more extreme, I think nobody will really care anymore about these peanuts.
So do you think then it will lead to not talking about the euro as something that makes everything more expensive? Will it be a better image for the euro in the general population?
Could be. I think it should be quite clear to most people that the current inflationary pressures stem from global energy and food prices, and not necessarily from exchange of a currency.
Okay. And if we look at the midterm development of the euro in Croatia, are there any specific challenges that the country needs to focus on now that they joined the eurozone?
Not really, I would say. I mean, as I mentioned, the change is limited given the de facto they had the euro already before. I mean, in principle, there was the option for exchange rate policy. However, Croatia never really used this. Croatia was rather willing to accept, for instance, a period of 6 years of stagnation and recession after the global financial crisis than to change anything with the exchange rate. And the reason basically was that Croatia was an extremely euroized economy. So both savings as well as loans were to a large extent denominated or indexed to the euro. So any change in, for instance, a depreciation of the nominal exchange rate vis-à-vis the euro would have caused the cost for those who have a loan quite a lot. And so that was never really an option. And plus, I would say there are basically two different interest groups. The tourism industry was always interested to rather have an appreciating currency where they can make more money, while the industry in the north of the country was more interested in having a depreciation of the currency. So the outcome was basically no change of the currency value compared to the euro at all.
Mm-hmm. What is the reason that Croatia is so much faster than other EU member countries that joined earlier, as far back as 2004, if we look at, for instance, Hungary or Czechia?
Well, particularly Hungary and Czechia are actually using their instrument of an exchange rate policy. And partly they can do it, it's more effective because they are not as euroized. So for instance, particularly the Czech Republic, people are saving in Czech crowns, they have their loans in Czech crowns, they think basically in Czech crowns, while in Croatia, any bigger exchange for, I don't know, real estate or cars, people would think in euros already before the introduction of the euro. So there is a different history also of inflationary pressures. There was a hyperinflation in Yugoslavia, where people then changed to a large extent to German mark as a means of saving and so on. So different backgrounds of those countries, and so for the Czech Republic it's still an option, for instance, to continue with the crown, although they obviously have also their pegs to the euro, but they leave it as an option for a critical crisis event.
And then if we look, for instance, to Bulgaria, which would be very much willing to introduce the euro, but is also slower in that case, what is the reason here?
Well, Bulgaria is in a difficult process of unstable governments, and so that is obviously not helpful if you want to secure all the conditions and conditionalities for introduction of euro. So I think once a more stable government will come, they will basically be also able to join the euro at some point.
Thank you very much for giving us an overview about this historic step of enlarging the Eurozone. It hasn't happened for quite some time now, and hopefully it's a positive signal for more integration, not only in the monetary policy, but also in other fields. As we are concluding this episode, we always ask our guests for a piece of art, music, literature concerning today's discussion, and is there something that you would recommend to bring the reflection further here?
Indeed, I would recommend to look at various memes that were around in social media that made fun of a design for the Croatian euro coins. Actually, this Martin was depicted by the winning kind of artists or person that won the competition, and it later turned out that this was just a cheap copy of a photograph that where the owner of the copyright was not asked, basically, and so there's a whole series of funny memes around this issue.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Mario, for your time and for coming to IDM today. This was CEE number 41. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you enjoyed this podcast? Then tune into another CEE episode and subscribe to the IDM podcast series on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or elsewhere you get your podcast. And also have a look at the rest of our work on our website www.idm.it. And please, for any feedback and podcast collaboration, feel free to contact us. This was CEE, Central Europe Explained, a podcast series produced by the Institute for the Danube Region and Central Europe.
IDM Podcast.
Institut für den Donauraum und Mitteleuropa.
Institute for the Danube Region and Central Europe.
European Perspectives.
Regional Actions.
Cooperation and expertise since 1953.